begins V'hoyak from the year Tafshin Lamed Beis. V'hoyak Yisav El Aretz Asher Avayah Lekechem Nois L'chav Yirish L'Vishafta Bo. It'll be when you come to the land that Hashem your God is giving you, and you will inherit it, and you will settle it, B'goymer, etc. But Tzarech Lav, and the Rebbe says we need to understand Mashetchila Namar Noisen L'cha. Initially it says he gives it to you. Shu'inyan HaMatan, the idea of giving to you, that's an idea of a gift. Only after, and afterwards it says, and you will inherit it. Shu'inyan HaYerusha, that's an idea of an inheritance. Though a gift and an inheritance are two distinct and different things. And he's going to explain in the brackets what's one of the differences, amongst other differences between a gift and an inheritance. Amongst the differences between a gift and an inheritance, a gift is from the mind and from the conscious thought of the giver. There needs to be a conscious thought that the one who's giving the gift is consciously deciding, I will give a gift to this person. To such a degree do we say that there's a conscious will and interest of the giver of the gift to give the gift, that the Chazal say whoever gives a gift, he gives it with a good eye, meaning he's not stingy. When a person sells something, so then he will be very exact, and he will say, well, you paid for a dozen eggs, you're not going to get 13 eggs. There's something called a baker's dozen, but putting that aside, generally you get exactly what you pay for. By a gift, it doesn't work that way. A gift, someone that's giving a gift is not usually, in a normal situation, the purpose of a gift is showing a certain type of benevolence, a good-heartedness. So he's not so exact, and he's not, like they say in Yiddish, oisgecheshbent, with a gift. Whoever gives a gift, he gives it with a good eye. So that is an indication that there's a conscious awareness of the giver who's giving the gift, because he's choosing to overlook any of the details, and he's just giving the gift out of the goodness of his heart. As opposed to an inheritance, is something that comes not by choice, because an inheritance automatically will automatically pass from the deceased to the person that gives that is inheriting. There is a din if a person made a condition about something that it says in the Torah. In other words, he made a condition to invalidate a law and a rule that's in the Torah. So then, if he makes such a condition, the condition is invalid. So, for example, if a person makes a condition that his daughter should also inherit amongst the children, he has, let's say, two boys and two girls. Al pidin Torah, only the boys inherit. If you made a condition that the girls should also inherit, that is not a valid condition. That doesn't work. And we see that inheritance is not something that's done by the person's choice. Of course, he could choose to give her the money beforehand, and there's all different types of documents that one can do, a halachic tzavah, to be able, halachic last will and testament, that could take care of all the different options that a person wants to take care of. But you can't explicitly go against the laws of Yerusha in the Torah, and because Yerusha, inheritance, is not something that is done by the person's choice, as opposed to a gift. Another difference between a gift and an inheritance, the idea of a gift isn't something separate outside of him. A person gives a gift, he takes something of his possessions, something of his money, and he shares it and he transfers it to someone else. There is no connection of the essence of the person with the person who's giving the gift with the receiver of the gift. It's only an external transfer of value and possessions. The ilu in Yerusha kosher etzem mitzius shalom moirish, as opposed to I give inheritance, it's connected with the very essence of the being of the one who is transferring and giving, and the one who's the estate from where it's coming from. Git avek zich alein, he is transferring himself. How come? Because we know the Chazal say the inheritor is now taking the place of the one who is giving over the inheritance. It does, in other words, it's not really halachically, we don't look at it as a transference of property and possessions. We don't look at the fact that the father, for example, that passed away, is transferring the possessions to their child. Rather, we look at it that once the father has passed away, so then the child now occupies the place of the father. He takes the place of the father, and being that he takes the place of the father, that is why he is now in possession of his father's possession. And we see this pasuk, like it says in the pasuk, that in the place of your fathers will be your children, meaning children take the place of their father. And that is why they inherit. So obviously there's a lot deeper and a more essential connection between the inheritor and the person who he's inheriting from, rather than if someone is giving a gift and the receiver of the gift. Despite the fact that there are such differences, and there's other differences as well that he doesn't go into over here, still in all, Vaf became still in all, continuing on line 27. There's no inner line numbers over here. Still in all, Nemru Kan Shnei and Yonim over here, it relates two matters. Noisin l'cha v'yirishta. It will be the land that I give you and the land that you inherit her. So the question is, why these two expressions, especially that they're not identical expressions? In the Torah, we will find often a repetition of certain terms, but usually the repetition is just repetition that's not contradictory between the terms. Here it's really two different terms, two different types of approaches, two different types of ways of possession, and he's still saying both of them together. The last line before the white lines, this idea is said concerning the mitzvah of the first fruits. That the mitzvah that he's referring to at the beginning of the parsha, it says, you'll come to Eretz Yisrael, and you will take possession of it in the two ways, Matana, Yerusha. Then you will do what? V'lokachta mereishis kol pri adam. Like it says in the continuation of Pasuk, you will take from the first of all the fruits of the land. So, umevar kol prote ha'inyanim bikurim. He explains over there the Pasuk and the ongoing psukim, all the detailed aspects of the mitzvah of first fruits. That the obligation of Bikurim is only when you come into Eretz Yisrael, and not only when you come into Eretz Yisrael, but you have to inherit it, and then you have to settle it, and only after all of this, and you finally settle the land, that's when the Yidden would have the obligation of Bikurim, of the first fruits. So that's the Hemshech Einyonim. He's talking about entering Eretz Yisrael and possessing it. But once they take possession of it, they will inhabit it. And once they have taken possession and they have inhabited it, so then the obligation, and here is the point of the parsha, now you are obligated in the mitzvah of Bikurim, and this is the way of doing it. Now the Chazal derive from this the fact that it says both v'yirishta v'yashavta ba, you will both inherit it and you will settle it. It doesn't just say kisave el aretz, when you come to the land, then you shall take from the first fruits. No, it says you'll come to the land and that I give you, and then you inherit it and you will settle it. Then you will take from the first fruits. From this we derive, Magi, this teaches us, that the Yidden were not obligated in the mitzvah of first fruits until they conquered the land and they divided the land. And the Chazal explained that it took 7 years to conquer it, and 7 years to afterwards, once they finished the conquest of Eretz Yisrael, took another 7 years to divide it and settle it, and so on. And that's what the pasuk means to tell you, only after you're fully settled in the land, that's when you have the mitzvah of first fruits, which was 14 years later. So they came into Eretz Yisrael in the year 2488, and in that year, they didn't yet bring the Bikurim. It took 14 years later, when they were all settled, that they started to bring Bikurim. So now the Rebbe says, this is not seemingly something unique to the mitzvah of Bikurim. There are other mitzvahs that are land-related, related to the land of Eretz Yisrael, and also they do not begin until the land has been settled, until after the Sheva Shekovsha, Sheva Shecholka, the 7 years of conquest, the 7 years of division. So he says in the second from the last line, Sh'afal Pishakenu Bekama Mitzvahs Atluyas B'Aretz. Though that this is so in many mitzvahs that are dependent upon Eretz Yisrael, in other words, are dependent upon the land of Eretz Yisrael, the lengthy description about V'yirishta, V'yishavta, and so on, it says concerning the mitzvah of Bikurim, though there are also other land-dependent mitzvahs that were only after the division and so on, and had all these limitations. So the very fact that the Torah decides to more explicitly and in a more lengthy way elaborate upon this idea over here by the mitzvah of Bikurim. So Mezem moving for this understood, that the mitzvah of Bikurim is considered like the rule, the general idea of this topic, that only after settling the land, only after the 7 years of conquest and 7 years of settling is this mitzvah applicable. And from this we derive for all other mitzvahs that are land dependent, that also that they are only after the 7 of the conquest and the 7 of the division of the land. They are like details in this general rule. The move on, and this idea is also understood about how Bikurim is such a general mitzvah that is in a way almost like encompassing many other mitzvahs. What the Chazal said in Medrash Tanchuma. Moshe Rabbeinu saw with the Ruach HaKodesh Beis HaMikdash Asad L'Charev, that the Beis HaMikdash in the future will become destroyed. V'Bikurim Asidim L'Pasik, and the first fruits will cease, because the mitzvah Bikurim was to be brought to the Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash. When there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's no bringing of Bikurim. Amad v'hiskin liYisrael sheyu mispalim shalosh pam b'chol yom. So he arose and he established for the Yidden that they should daven 3 times daily. Shemezem, moving for this understood, shebikurim hu inin klali, that bikurim, the first fruits, is such a general thing. Just like the 3 tefillas every day are established corresponding to the Tamid Karbanas, so too the Bikurim take the place of the Karbanas. So if the Bikurim take place, I'm sorry that that not the Bikurim take place at the place of the Karbanas, that tefillas take place of the Bikurim. So just like we understand how general tefillas are from the fact that they're in the place of the Karban Tamid, so if the Bikurim are being replaced by the tefillas as well, so that means that Bikurim is also a very general thing, and that's why we have the tefillas, the davening, as a replacement for the Bikurim. So now the Rebbe asks, when you understand the idea behind this is, Madua Bikurim hem inin klali, what is so general, what is so special, what is so unique and great about the first fruits? And also, in a more specific manner, v'gam ma'u hakesher that fills the Bikurim. Also, what's the connection between davening and the first fruits? Shalachein hiskin Moshe fills from kind of Bikurim. Therefore, Moshe established davening in the place of Bikurim. There must be some type of connection between them. But that's the reason why he established this. Ois base. Acha Inyan, but the idea behind this is Hine Inyan Abikurim, the idea of the first fruits. Shem Reishis Pri Adam, they are considered the first of the fruits of the land. But the main thing is that the category that they fit into is in the word Reishis. And Reishis is very significant spiritually. So Moira Alagdim Lechol Seder Ishtalshlos. The fact that the Bikurim is called a Reishis indicates spiritually a level that is higher and preceding the entire chain order of descent. This means in addition to the fact that in the general chain order of descent of the worlds, there are things that precede and things that follow. There are things that are first and there are things that are later. So that's in Seder Ishtalshus itself. But the reishis we're talking about over here is a reishis in a way that precedes. It's not the first of many, it precedes the whole chain order of descent. There are those matters that existed even prior to the world being created. Like it's brought down the Medrash, two things preceded the world, Torah of Yisrael, the Torah and the Yidden. Like we have right away in the beginning of Chumash, Bereishis, Beis Reishis. Two things are called Reishis. Why are they called Reishis? Because they're Kadmul Olam, they preceded the world. And when we say they preceded the world, it doesn't just mean they preceded the physical world, but they preceded the whole level of creation, the whole Seder Ishtalshus. And from of these two things that are called Reishis, there is in those two Reishis, and there's also a hierarchy. Amongst these two things itself, Yisrael Kadmul Torah, Yisrael preceded Torah. Shenemar, like it says, Tzaves b'nei Yisrael, Dabral b'nei Yisrael, command the b'nei Yisrael and speak to the b'nei Yisrael. In other words, the very fact that Torah is telling you and recording the fact that you should speak to the b'nei Yisrael, you should command the b'nei Yisrael, that means that the Torah is there for the Yidden. The Yidden preceded the Torah, and Torah is something in service of to direct the Yidden. So Yidden are higher than Torah. Now the Rebbe is going to say in the brackets, but who tells us that? Torah tells us that. So Torah itself is the means by which we find out that Yidden is higher than the Torah. How come? Why is Torah the means to tell us this? So he says in the brackets, line 21, this means the very fact that Yidden preceded Torah, we know from the Torah. So he's going to give an example of something else that is higher than Torah, and still in all, Torah is the means by which we know about it. Similar to what's explained in a different place. Concerning the mitzvah of tshuva. Though tshuva is higher than Torah, where do we see that tshuva is higher than Torah? That's why it has the capability to repair the blemishes of someone that transgresses on the words of the Torah, because only something that is higher can repair something that's lower. If tshuva were lower than Torah, it couldn't affect those things that went against Torah. The only way you could fix up the mitzvah of the Torah that a Yid, chas v'sholem, caused a blemish in is because tshuva comes from a higher place. So tshuva is higher than Torah. Mikol makim is galus miles tshuva gufei de Torah. How do we know? What reveals this great quality of tshuva, that tshuva is higher than Torah, and therefore it can fulfill all the blemishes? Torah is the one that informs us. So the question is on this itself. Why is this that Torah, which is lower than Tshuva, and Torah, which is lower than Yidden, informs us about how high Yidden are and how high Yisrael is? So the reason for this is Fishat Torah, Torah Samis, because the Torah is a Torah of truth. What does that mean, the Torah of truth? It doesn't just mean like the simple meaning of Torah of truth, that everything that says in the Torah is true, but Torah it communicates the truth. Its job and its purpose is to give us the true idea and the true awareness of everything. Through Torah, one knows the truth of every matter. So if you want to know what the true level of tshuva is, you want to know what the truth is about Yidden, Torah, which is Torah's emes, is the one, the delivery system, the channel, the means through which the truth becomes manifest. Moving for this understood. Al Yisrael, top of page Zayin, that idea of first fruits is going about the Yidden. Why is it referring to Yidden? Because even in firsts, they were shekad mafil Torah. They preceded even Torah. Behind this means though both of them preceded the world, still in all, that's why they're called Reishis. Kemaim, like it says, Bereishis, Beis Reishis. Why does the Chumash begin with the words Bereishis? Because it's two Reishis, like we mentioned before earlier, but Rashi brings on a Chumash. The two Reishis is Bishvil Torah Shnikra Reishis, for the sake of Torah, which is called first, or Bishvil Yisrael Shnikra Reishis, for Yidden that are called Reishis. So even though both of them are Reishis, Mikol Malkim still in all Bezeh, Gufi Yisrael Kadmal Torah. In these two Reishis in itself, who is the first of the Reishis and who preceded which? That's Yidden preceded the Torah. This is also the reason why it says that when we take from the agriculture of the land, and we have to bring it to the different places. We have to take the Bikurim and bring it to the Beis HaMikdash and give it to the Kohen. We have to take Truma and give it to our local Kohen, etc., or any Kohen. So you're looking now at this the crop, and you're wondering, okay, which comes first? Do I give first Bikurim, first Truma? So the din is that Bikurim is what you give first to the Kohen, or you bring first to the Beis HaMikdash, etc. Then, once you've removed from the crop the first fruits to bring to the Beis HaMikdash as Bikurim, then you will give Truma as in the halachas of what you have to give for Truma. Though we find that in the Torah, not only Bikurim is called Reishis, but Truma is also called Reishis. So since Truma is also called Reishis, so why, if they're both Reishis, why do I give precedence to Bikurim over Truma? Because it's the same precedence that Yidden have over Torah. They says, Shetruma koyala Torah. Truma refers to Torah in the spiritual sense. Torah mem. The letters of the word Truma make up the word of Torah mem, meaning the Torah shenitna la'arboim yom that was given on the 40 days of Moshe on Har Sinai. Ubikurim kol Yisrael shekadmu la-Torah, and Bikurim is referring to Yidden that preceded the Torah. Since Bikurim is referring to Yidden that preceded the Torah, therefore, in the similar vein is the actual first fruits, which is corresponding to Yidden. That's given first before Truma, which corresponds to Torah. Okay, let's continue on line 10, page Zayin, second paragraph. The Rebbe says a very important point. All these things, when we're talking about the high level of Yidden and so on, this is all the way it is in the spiritual realms. When it comes down here to this world, things get changed around. Hakdim b'di Yisrael, the idea of Yidden being higher than and preceding, by Bikurim, Truma, like the Bikurim that precedes Truma, that's from the perspective of the root and the source of Neshama, the way it's above in the Oil Misal Yonim. But following the way it is in the Oil Misal Yonim, there's the idea of when you will arrive, you will come to the land. The it's referring to the descent of the neshama down here below, to become enclosed in a physical body. And then, when it's enclosed in a physical body, this idea about Bikurim is not necessarily evident and clear. It's known It's not the entirety of the neshama, the way it's above, that it shines and becomes enclosed in the body. How do we know that it's not the entirety of the neshama? Like it's obvious from the fact that even a malach who is on a lesser level than a neshama is a third of the world, or stands in a third of the world, and the Rebbe says that there's two explanations what that means. Like there's the two explanations. If a malach is as big as a third of the world, or the world is a third of how much a malach is. In other words, a malach is 3 times the size of the world. And a malach, v'neshamas im l'mayla ma malachim. Neshamas are higher than malachim. So if malachim are so huge, how can a neshama, which is greater than malachim, fit into the body? How is it possible for a neshama to become enclosed in the body? Only a ray of the neshama shines and is enclosed in the body. It's called the foot of the neshama that becomes enclosed in the body. Top of page ches, the core and the root of the neshama, the neshama remains above. The part that remains above is known as the mazel of the neshama. Concerning the mazel of the neshama, the Chazal said, though they did not see Mazlayu Chazi, their neshama above saw, their mazel neshama saw above. That's why the people that were around the Nile trembled when the Nile received the prophecy, even though they didn't see anything, because their source of neshama above saw it. Because there is this type of distinction of the neshama above versus the neshama down here below. The primary service of a person is to join and bond the soul that's in the body to its source of the neshama, that the mazel of the neshama should shine and become revealed also in the soul that's in the body. And that's the mitzvah bikurim. You come into the land, you come into the earth, then you have the mitzvah of bikurim, meaning lahavi priya ilan, to bring the fruits of the tree. Hein on neshamas shemeslapshim b'irim beguf. The fruits of the tree is talking about the neshamas that's enclosed and shining in the body, and you need to bring them up to the Beis Hamikdash, to the kohen, lachabram ulakashram b'sharsham, to join them and bond them with their root. Concerning this, it says, that's why it says that the kohen will take the basket from your hand, and he will place it before the altar of Hashem. This is similar to what the Chazal say. Mechol is considered a supernal kohen gadol. Makriv neshamas al gabim mizbeach ha'elyon. He offers up the neshamas upon the supernal mizbeach, the spiritual mizbeach above. So when we're talking about the kohen offering, picking up and placing, taking the tender and putting it before the mizbeach, that's also in the spiritual level of taking our neshama down here and joining it and rejoining it with our source above. This is called the return of the lights of the feminine, which is Malchus, the source of Knesset Yisrael, returning it upwards and elevating it. With Pratis Yaisa, and more specifically, in the Bikurim, there are 2 stages. The bringing of the first fruits, that's the elevation, and taking our soul down here in the body and elevating it and raising it up to the mazel of the neshama above. And following that it says, you shall proclaim and say, Kriyas HaParsha Shal Bikurim, we have to read the whole thing that it says over there in the Bikurim, over there, Arami Avid Avi, etc., etc. What is the idea of reading of the Parsha? That reading is about calling down, just like what you call Kriya. Kriya is the word calling also. We're calling down and drawing down Lahamchil B'chinas HaBikurim Shal Neshama Milmailo Lamata, to draw down the level of the first fruits of Neshama from above to below. That's the idea of the Bikurim. The mitzvah of Bikurim is that joining in 2 directions, from below to above and above to below, our neshama down here with the source of the neshama, the mazel and the neshama above, which is the idea of the level that precedes the entire Seder Ishtalshus, even higher than Torah.